Θα περάσουμε στη Ruth Catlow, θεωρητικό τέχνη, συνειδήτρια του οργανισμού πλατφόρμας Furtherfield, που ασχολείται με την τεχνολογία και την κοινωνική αλλαγή. So, Ruth, thank you.
The sovereignty of the island doesn't account to like America or Puerto Rico or anything land-based. Because of the infrastructure in terms of the internet which is provided, basically we have allegiance to the big corporations that provide that have sort of sponsored us and traditionally kind of provided that infrastructure. So yeah, it's a kind of different kind of sovereignty, I suppose.
Okay, and I understand you're responsible for the head of education, is that correct? Could you tell me what your role is?
Well, when all the children come to school on their first day, they're chipped. So it actually removes all their kind of memory and, you know, any experiences that they've had up until that age. And then, but we have been discussing the problems because there is one child that refuses, that we just haven't been unable to kind of, you know, chip. So it's been quite difficult. The kids learn on their own. We don't educate as such. There's no kind of dynamic between the teacher and the children. And they're very advanced, actually. They understand networks and they're just able to learn a lot quicker. And we found that it's much more beneficial to allow them to do that amongst themselves rather than us try and kind of shape what is going on. And what they do is they enter into some of the rituals in society where you know they have the opportunity to vote on a daily basis, and also we've got a structure where they gain points from like their behaviour basically, and it's about their ability to kind of like coexist in a harmonious way with everybody else. And so they sort of realise quite quickly, I guess, that, you know, if they behave in certain ways and are like, you know, for the good of the rest of the society, then they gain these kind of like this currency basically. So yeah, it's kind of quite a sort of child-led with certain things in place, and then they just learn.
Okay, thank you very much.
So let's do a little recap. Where had we got to? We'd watched Helen here talk about a world in which they're chipping their children in order to incentivise good behaviour, and they teach themselves in a child-centred world now. I was interested how Matt's kind of reading of the link between the power of the protocol or the action of the protocol matched how we have a kind of shared understanding of kind of biblical texts or religious texts also as protocols, acting in a kind of very similar organising and coordinating way. So, we've got two images here. The one at the top is the blueprint for the internet and the web by Paul Baran, which he created for the Rand Corporation in the 60s. It's the diagram from which 1,000 dreams of decentralization bloomed. And it was a kind of changing point. It's a diagram that depicts a change in the way we were thinking about how culture would be transmitted. So we can think of this diagram on the left as an authoritative broadcaster sitting at the centre, broadcasting outwards to a number of nodes. I think of them as people watching telly sitting on the sofa. And then the web that we end up with is a combination of the decentralised and distributed networks. And the distributed web gives us a way to become resilient and censorship-proof. So you take out any number of those nets, those nodes, and messages can still route around. And these are now two-way systems, so we're sending messages in both directions. The decentralized diagram is allowing us to hop across distance and also to create hubs. And so, yeah, the web we have now and the internet we have now is some kind of combination of these things. The diagram below is from Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, and it's a way to make decentralization accountable, trustless, or I prefer to think of it as trustworthy. It feels more kind of natural for me to think of it in that way, and censorship-proof. So the reason I call these dangerous diagrams is I'm kind of inspired by Jaya Clara Brecker's magisterial guide to the Satoshi white paper that's just come out, in which she discusses the danger of individuals attempting to live and organising according to machine systems that inspire them. And so I'm going to quote her reporting on something that she's seen. So she says, and so suddenly he said, this young guy with dangly hair and a nervous mouth at an Ethereum meetup at a city in old Europa. Anyone who cannot interact with the blockchain and markets effectively perhaps is of an inferior genetics, and their extinction might not be such a bad thing. More recently, and slightly more gently, but I think it's kind of heading in the same direction, I was at a meeting for decentralized governance in Berlin in very sincere and earnest discussions about how to best progress decentralized governance in this space. And a developer said, we just need to get to a point where people understand incentive systems and market mechanisms. This is the solution to better governance. So Jaya's text both conveys the awe that she felt and many people have since felt by the kind of conceptual completeness and the mathematical beauty of Satoshi's idea, especially amongst blockchain proponents, but amongst its adherents, the kind of objective truth manifested in the protocol can also produce a kind of shadow of disgust for those people or aspects of life that sit out with them or won't fit into them. Because I feel my remit is really to talk about art, so I also want to show you these. Each of these diagrams has a kind of matching, this is what art does in this space diagram. And the simple net art diagram by MTTA, 1997, so the web is really kind of going now, it's turning into a kind of public system for like many-to-many messaging and co-creation. And we have the art happening here, which is kind of between computers or between mechanisms. And it feels like it has a kind of fluxus spirit to it, the kind of intermediate spirit. Whereas Rob Myers' homage and reworking the simple blockchain art diagram. The art happens here, and it's happening within the time-stamped block. And this is telling us something new potentially about the relationship between art and capital and art and time, and a kind of sense of progression that I find fascinating and uncomfortable. Okay, so now with feeling. So this diagram on the right is a graphic that I created for a Furtherfield project called Do It With Others back in 2006. Because my introduction was in Greek, I don't know what you told them about me, so I might just have to introduce myself in case this just makes no sense. I'm an artist, and I have since the mid-90s initiated and then participated in the growth of a kind of online community hub of artists, techies and activists who kind of were in alignment with the spirit of free and open source software and kind of peer-to-peer cultures. Since 2004, we've also run a gallery and a kind of lab space where we experiment with all kinds of things. And this is our current gallery and lab. And we're based in the heart of Finsbury Park, which is a North London park in which 180 different languages are spoken. So it's very London, very dynamic, quite scruffy. And we make it our business to talk about often quite abstract things and make them feelable to as many people as we can, blockchain being one of those things. Our focus is on how network technology is changing the way we relate to each other and how it changes power. And DIWO, Do It With Others, was our kind of coming to terms with what life in the web was and how we could read it. So it was this kind of many categories of things, so couples, insects, signs. We've got a horrible graphic here for the grassroots here, this tuft of grass at the bottom. We have GNU, which is the logo for free, libre, open software. We have the philosopher, the hysteric, and a talking dildo as an homage to the role that pornography and sex and kind of libidinal powers have played in network cultures, really, as they've grown up. And DIWO was deliberately moving on from the spirit, the kind of DIY spirit of punk. So this is quite individualistic, but a real kind of like making one's own culture by making tools. You make a noise and that's your culture. And a sense that the network space allowed us to see ourselves together in a different way, to see ourselves globally together as co-creating planetary culture in a different way, and that the others that we are talking about are really many across many different categories: natural, machinic, symbolic, or like really kind of category hopping. And the reason my main purpose for putting this in is that in all of our work with the blockchain, I feel like because we have this space that we are constantly in a process of, we have to maintain a building, we have to be able to talk to people and not to alienate them. We want them to feel welcome and interested and fascinated by the same things that we are, at least sometimes. They're from very different backgrounds from each other and from us. This has given us quite a kind of strong sense of locality and the role of locality in thinking about network technology. So on the question of a kind of U-turn, so we know that you can't turn back the clock in blockchain. Blockchain is a clock in space. It's the god of time in place, and you can't turn around. You can go back in time and restart it, as the response to the DAO hack showed us, though it will create theological style schisms, as Matt was talking about. But you can't reverse. So what you can do, though, is the U-turn. So you see what I've done there. This is a practice in contemporary Buddhist psychology that invites the practitioner, when they find themselves preoccupied or caught in trance through everyday suffering, so praise and blame, pleasure and pain, the things that preoccupy us. It invites them to turn their attention to their bodies and through meditation to perform a kind of series of systems checks for the condition of the organism. So how is the mind? How is the breathing? How is the heart? What sensations are where? What is the nature of the emergency that it is undergoing? To become curious and to learn its ways. And this system check reveals the mind as just one part of the animal body that, along with the feelings, is in constant flux. And it gives us another off-chain way for us to see ourselves together. We are all these kinds of animals. And this, I think, comes with it brings its own philosophy of agency. So it asserts that life flows from the tip of intention and nurtured by attention. And I'm really interested in this relationship between agency and intention, and really fascinated by this kind of dichotomy that Bateson found himself in, that Keir was talking about, this kind of, do we make it our job to enlist and align the intentions of everyone so that we can all pull together in a direction that's good for us, or do we just assume that they're all too dumb, or that they don't know what's good for them, all this kind of stuff. So the role of intention in kind of networked collective action feels really important to me. And this thing of the U-turn it's kind of suggesting that we pay close attention to our intentions. And another way to put this would be to say, be careful what you wish for. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of a change of pace now. And this is just to bring you, to let you know what we've been doing. So Furtherfield's been working in the blockchain space since 2004, when Rob Myers, who's an artist, developer, and philosopher, let's call him a philosopher because I think that's what he is, wrote a book called DAO, Do It With Others, in which he helped us to understand how the DAOs were changing what it meant to collaborate and coordinate on the net. He helped us to think about what the kind of political complexions were at play in here and what some of the outcomes might be. And it was a kind of, it was a bit of a challenge to deal with some quite difficult things and work out what our relationship was going to be to this new space. So in 2015, we announced the Art Data Money program, and this was about hacking the new networked money as an artistic medium. It was a mix of pure kind of delight and experimentation and also pragmatism. We wanted to understand how blockchain tech would impact society, extend expressive range, and we put out a call to people to invite them to help us work out whether we could use blockchains to build a commons for the arts in the networked age. So I'm now going to share with you some of the things that we've discovered, some of the things we're working on, and yes, kind of where we've got to. So we've worked out, it wasn't hard to work this out, that the arts have really got a problem. There's a very awkward relationship between the value of art to society and the way it's resourced and funded. I think this chimes, it kind of rhymes really well, I think, with all the questions about extrinsic incentivization in crypto spaces. I really struggle with this as the relationship between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and I think it's why it's really important to have artists in this space, actually, because it's so core. It's a core question to their survival on a daily basis. Where's the money coming from? How is it valued? So the art world garners great wealth, and yet even in our richest cities, most artists really struggle to make a living. We, at the same time, see an increasing centralisation and homogeneity in arts production and the way it's circulated, and arts used as a vehicle for speculation and money laundering. And this great image by William Powida, I don't know how to pronounce his name, check it out, you can find it online. It looks like a problem of both centralisation and hierarchy. So, Damien Hirst famously said, "Art is about life, art markets are about money." I hate quoting Damien Hirst, but it's a really good quote. That's actually really helpful. And Jess Hallgrave has created this map of the blockchain and the arts ecology, and it shows everything the business of the arts market and is up to in the blockchain space. So we're seeing title, provenance, authenticity. We're seeing auction. We're seeing the issuance of tokens, the securitization. These are the things that immediately, when you have large amounts of money to spare, this is what you can spend your money on, or this is what arts business is spending its money on to make more money. And the race is now on in the professionalised arts sector to build the one blockchain art protocol to rule them all. I should probably say kind of art market protocol to rule them all. I think maybe Matt is building the one blockchain art protocol to rule them all because it feels like it's more about life, maybe. Optimizing art market machineries for profit with automated authentication, provenance and fractionalization. It will hasten the absolute and final consolidation of art into a financial asset class. This vision of a future has an art world anticipates an increase of millions of new collectors learning to speculate, hold and hedge portfolios of artists whose value is traded on stock markets, all enabled by blockchain technologies. So I think there's some impatience out there in the world because the blockchain is yet to deliver in a way that people who aren't in the development space can actually to deliver on the promise, which is to empower self-organized collectives of people through more distributed forms of governance and infrastructure. But these are some of the things that we're kind of seeing as opportunities. I'm not going to read them because I feel like they've already been discussed. But central to the kind of work in this direction is a focus on community. And it raises important critical questions about the future of the art market, definitely, and Hito Styles done some really important and interesting thinking around this. But I think first and most important is kind of just to establish what it is we think we're doing and why it's important. So Max Haven crystallized it really nicely, I think, by saying radical imagination is not something individuals have, but something collectives do. And so artists are now looking for better systems for supporting cooperation and shared values through these decentralized technologies, including blockchains. We're working on a project called Culture Stake, and on the left here, Culture Stake is a machine that makes art worlds. And this is a quote from the Sol LeWitt. It's a Sol LeWitt quote, so a kind of early art, conceptual artist. And he said that the idea becomes the machine that makes the art. And I kind of see this as a kind of precursor to where we're at now. So this is one of the things we're working on. It's a prototype for a federated transnational community of communities. We're looking to use both to combine DAOs and a quadratic voting system. So this is a system that enables people to express both preference and intensity of preference, and they have to be careful with their votes as well. I'm really disappointed. I feel like we're at the end of democratic processes as they stand at the moment, being an English person having to watch the slow car crash of Brexit at the moment. And new experiments with voting systems feel worthwhile to me. So what we're planning to do is to work on a project with the Furtherfield online community, and this is a 20-year-old community now who love and hate each other. They have tens of years of disputes and collaboration and production. And so we're looking to really test the promise. whether we can harness the collective intelligence of geographically distributed communities, whether we can decentralise organisational decision-making. I'm very interested in whether that's actually possible. And also to engage audiences as stakeholders, so to extend the kind of idea of the art world beyond the people who make it, do it, and try and sell it. So many of the art machine diagrams fail to talk about audiences. This is really strange to me, like who it's for, what it's for, and who it's for. And our kind of local aim is to formalise and make legible previously intangible and disparate stakeholders for deeper, more reflective governance. As a community that has evolved over 20 years, we now have multiple generations of people who are separated from each other by the different platforms that they use, the different experiences they've had. And we're really interested in whether by experimenting with systems of governance and governance where they can actually start to see their preferences, whether they can see themselves together in different ways. Okay, I'm going to finish up with an explanation of that video that you saw. So, one, we're looking to build some transnational infrastructure. We'll do it with multiple localities. It's the only way to understand whether something's actually working or not. Meanwhile, we're kind of running a series of workshops where we invite people from across very broad disciplines, so developers, venture capitalists, social scientists, philosophers, to come together and to look with us at different elements of the promise of cryptoeconomics and different elements and features of blockchain. These are the DAO Labs, you'll remember that name. And the video you saw was a news documentary from a 3-hour live-action role play that we ran with an artist called Ed Fornielis called What Will It Be Like When We Buy an Island on the Blockchain? We were overtaken by the present because Brock Pierce pretty much put what we had intended to do into action before we could get to it, and built his own colony on Puerto Rico. Go and look at the Naomi Klein article on this if you're interested. It's fascinating and horrifying. And we ran, over these 3 hours, we ran 4 islands. On each island had 12 different roles, so things like agriculture, head of health, education, etc. There were 3 meetings held over a fictional period of 50 years. So the first was a board meeting where everyone was talking about the things that they were doing. The second was the Truth and Reconciliation Committee 50 years later, where everyone told the truth about all the awful things they'd done and what the consequences were for it. And the final one was the World Island Summit that happened the next day, and everyone said how wonderful everything was. So we kind of got to work with the kind of confidence and narrative systems. And we had an illustrator and a roving news crew, and the video you saw was one of our participants talking to the roving news crew. So I'll wrap up here just with this thought from Rachel O'Dwyer. So, yeah, she's saying that because she's essentially saying technology will not save us. We need to get in the middle of this, and communities need to get into the middle of it all, because we need to kind of layer these trustworthy systems on top of other human and kind of multiple being systems of trustworthiness in order to make things that make sense and allow us to connect transnationally or translocally. I've used my time. No questions.